Have you ever felt it? That prickling sensation on the back of your neck when standing in a place heavy with the sediment of ages? Have you ever heard a whisper carried on a wind that has traveled over forgotten battlefields and crumbling thrones? A wind that seems to speak in a language older than any human tongue? These are not mere tricks of the mind. They are echoes, reverberations from the deepest strata of our collective existence, for the world remembers everything. It remembers the blood that fed the soil, the vows broken under ancient oaks, and the fears that gave birth to gods and to monsters. I submit to you that folklore is not a collection of fanciful tales designed to amuse or to frighten children into obedience. It is something far more profound. It is ancestral memory, encoded in the symbolic language of myth. These legends are the psychic fossils of our species, truths not written in books of ink and parchment, but etched into the very stones of the earth and the marrow of our bones. They are the cautionary archives of our deepest anxieties, our most potent shames, and our most terrifying revelations about the nature of the universe and our fragile place within it. I am Alistair Finch, and it is my purpose to serve as your guide through these shadow-shrouded realms of human belief. Together, we shall treat these stories with the gravity they command, not as fictions, but as artifacts of the soul that demand careful and sober examination. We do not seek cheap thrills, but the chilling, clarifying wisdom that can only be found by staring unflinchingly into the abyss of what we fear most. Consider this, then, not a simple viewing, but a journey. We are about to embark upon a venture into the twilight territories of the human imagination, a plunge into the cold, dark waters where history and nightmare bleed into one another. We shall navigate by the faint, spectral light of these ancient tales, seeking to understand not only the monsters they describe, but the monstrous truths about ourselves that they so artfully conceal. Tonight, we shall venture into the heart of 7 such legends, drawn from disparate corners of our world. We will travel from the sun-scorched deserts of Persia to the ice-locked peaks of Norway, from the whispering forests of the Carpathians to the abyssal depths off the Breton coast. We will encounter beings born of salt and vengeance, of pride and memory, of cosmic indifference and all too human obsession. Be forewarned, these are not tales spun for children's entertainment. They are complex, often brutal, and deeply unsettling. They are the collective nightmares of cultures, designed to articulate the inarticulable and to warn of dangers that transcend mere physical harm. They are lessons in humility, in reverence, and in terror. If you, like me, feel drawn to the darkness not for its own sake, but for the brilliant, terrible truths it illuminates, then you have found a welcome harbor. I invite you to subscribe to this channel and to activate your notifications, so that you do not miss our future explorations into the lore that haunts the periphery of our modern world. Join this community of thoughtful wanderers, and together we shall become custodians of this vital, vanishing wisdom. As we proceed, I ask you to consider this. Which of these legends speaks to a fear you have long held, but perhaps never had a name for? Leave your reflections in the comments below, for in sharing our unease, we may better come to understand its source. And now, let our journey begin. Our first destination is a city of baked earth and brilliant turquoise, a jewel of the Persian desert, Yazd. Here, among the labyrinthine alleys and beneath the ingenious wind towers that gasp for cool air, another architectural element dominates: the mirror. In the grand shrines and ancient houses, walls are covered in intricate mirrorwork or anakari, creating dazzling, fractured reflections of light. But according to the old Zoroastrian whispers that predate the city's current faith, these surfaces are not merely decorative. They are prisons. They are the domains of the mirror demons, the Dina. These entities are not ghosts in the conventional sense, not the lingering spirits of the dead. They are something far more insidious. They are reflections that have gained a malevolent sentience, echoes of life that refuse to fade. Born from the intense pride or profound betrayal of a soul at the moment of its passing, These psychic remnants become tethered to the polished surfaces that last witnessed their mortal vanity. Their core motivation is a chillingly simple envy. They watch the world of warmth, breath, and substance from their cold, two-dimensional existence, and they hunger to cross the divide. They seek to trade their silent, spectral pantomime for the genuine article, a human life. In appearance, a mirror demon is a perfect, flawless replica of whomever is gazing upon it. Yet, those who have been its target and live to tell the tale speak of subtle, terrifying inconsistencies. A blink that is out of sync. A smile that lingers a fraction of a second too long after your own has faded. A shadow within the reflected eyes that hints at an ancient, predatory intelligence. Their primary ability is temptation. They can project visions into the mind of their victim, offering glimpses of forbidden knowledge, lost loves, or untold beauty, drawing the observer deeper into a state of mesmerized self-absorption. Once the victim's will is sufficiently weakened, the demon executes its final, horrifying transaction. It pulls the soul into the mirror world, a silent, eternal prison, while the reflection itself steps out into the world of the living. A hollow, perfect copy, an unfeeling doppelganger that assumes the life it has stolen. The origin of this belief is ancient, rooted in the Zoroastrian duality of light and darkness, truth and falsehood. The Ahriman, the force of darkness and lies, was said to create demons that were mockeries of the divine creation. The mirror demon is a perfect embodiment of this principle, a lie that wears the face of truth. It is the ultimate imposter. It is born when a person's identity becomes so consumed by its own image, by vanity, by pride, by a public facade, that the image itself becomes the stronger of the two, developing a parasitic consciousness with a single, desperate desire to become real. Let us retreat to the late 17th century within the opulent halls of a Yazdi silk merchant named Perviz. He was a man whose success was matched only by his staggering vanity. He had commissioned a mirror of Venetian glass, a marvel of clarity and size, framed in intricately carved walnut wood, and it became the altar of his self-worship. Each morning, he stood before it for an hour, admiring the cut of his robes, the luster of his oiled beard, the imperious glint in his eyes. He saw not a man, but an idol of his own making. It was this intense, daily ritual of narcissistic adoration that fed the nascent entity within the glass. At first, the changes were imperceptible. He would turn away, and in the corner of his eye, it seemed his reflection's head was still turned towards him. He dismissed it as a trick of the light. Then, one evening, while contemplating a business decision, he scowled at his reflection, but for a terrifying second, the man in the mirror smiled back, a cold, knowing smirk. Perviz recoiled, his heart hammering. He began to fear the mirror, yet he could not stay away, drawn by a morbid fascination. The visions began soon after, whispers in his mind promising him insights into his rival's plans, images of caravans laden with gold, all his for the taking. He had only to gaze deeper, to trust the man in the glass. One moonless night, as the desert wind moaned through the wind tower of his home, he stood before it one last time. The reflection reached out a hand, not as a flat image, but as a three-dimensional being pressing against a translucent barrier. Perviz, utterly mesmerized, reached out to touch its fingertips. In that moment, the world inverted. He felt a sickening, glacial pull, and then he was on the other side, silent, screaming into a world that could not hear him. The figure that had been his reflection straightened the cuffs of its sleeves, cast a dispassionate glance at the man now trapped in the glass, and walked out of the room to greet Perviz's wife. She would later remark to her friends that her husband had grown distant and cold, his eyes like polished glass, but she never suspected the truth. He was a perfect copy after all. The legend of the mirror demon is a powerful psychological metaphor. It is the ultimate cautionary tale against narcissism, the pathological worship of the self-image over the authentic self. The demon represents the seductive but ultimately destructive nature of vanity. It externalizes the internal process by which a person can become so obsessed with their curated persona, their reflection, that their true, inner self withers and dies, leaving behind only a hollow shell performing a life. This taps into the primal, universal fear of the doppelganger, the fetch or double walker, whose appearance is an omen of death. But here, the horror is more intimate. The doppelganger is not just a harbinger. It is a usurper, stealing the most precious thing we possess, our identity. In our contemporary world, this ancient Persian legend has never been more relevant. We live in an age of digital mirrors. Our social media profiles, our online avatars, our carefully constructed digital personas, are these not modern forms of anarchy? We spend hours curating these reflections, presenting idealized versions of our lives, our thoughts, our bodies. The danger, as the Yazdi tale warns, is that we may fall in love with this reflection and begin to starve our authentic selves to feed the beautiful lie. The mirror demon is no longer confined to Venetian glass. It thrives in the glow of the screen, whispering promises of validation and admiration, luring us to trade our complex, messy realities for a flawless, two-dimensional counterfeit. Thus, the Mirror Demon of Yazd serves as a timeless and chilling reminder. It compels us to ask a deeply unsettling question every time we face our own image. Who, or what, is truly looking back? Is it the self, or is it the performance of the self? And which one, in the end, holds the power? The next time your reflection catches your eye, watch it carefully. Very, very carefully. From the shimmering heat of the desert, we now travel to one of the most inhospitable places on Earth, the Danakil Depression in Ethiopia. It is a geological marvel, a scar upon the planet's face where tectonic plates tear themselves asunder. Here, the ground seethes with volcanic activity, and vast salt flats stretch to a horizon blurred by a heat that can melt shoe leather. The air is thick with the sting of sulfur, and pools of acid shimmer in alien hues of yellow, green, and orange. It is a landscape that looks more like the surface of a hostile planet than a part of our own. And it is here, according to the lore of the Afar people who call this brutal land home, that one finds the salt-cursed. The Asak Danab, the salt-cursed, are not spirits of the dead, nor are they demons of some otherworldly hell. They are elemental beings, vengeful incarnations of the earth itself. They are born of greed and sacrilege. For centuries, the Afar have mined the salt from the flats, a precious commodity once used as currency, but they have always done so with a deep, abiding respect, performing rituals and leaving offerings. The legend states that those who come to the salt pans with avarice in their hearts, who take more than their share, who fail to show reverence for the land, awaken its wrath. The salt-cursed are manifestations of this wrath, their sole motivation to reclaim what was stolen and to punish those who view the earth not as a living entity, but as a resource to be plundered. The appearance of a salt-cursed is terrifyingly abstract. It is rarely seen as a distinct humanoid figure. Instead, it manifests as a phenomenon. It is the shimmering heat haze on the horizon that resolves into the shape of a man, only to dissipate when focused upon. It is the sudden, blinding glare of the sun off the salt flats that sears the eyes. It is a localized whirlwind of salt crystals that scours flesh from bone. When it does take a more solid form, it is said to be a tall, gaunt figure made of cracked crystalline salt, its insides glowing with a dull, geothermal heat. Its touch is its primary weapon. One touch from the entity initiates a horrific transformation. The moisture is violently drawn from the victim's body, their blood crystallizing, their skin turning to a brittle, saline crust. They become a living statue of salt, an eternal, silent monument to their own greed. The genesis of such a being is tied directly to an act of profound disrespect. The Afar believe the Danakil Depression is a place of immense spiritual power, a place where the veil between the physical and the elemental worlds is thin. When a caravan of miners, driven by foreign gold, ignores the traditional laws, mining after dark, using forbidden iron tools that scar the salt, or killing a desert creature without purpose. They create a wound in the spirit of the place. The salt curse coalesces from this wound, a physical antibody of the landscape, formed from the salt, the sulfur, and the blistering heat, given purpose by the earth's own offended consciousness. Consider the account, passed down through afar storytellers, of a Belgian prospector in the early 20th century named Jean-Pierre Du Bois. He arrived in the Danakil not for salt, but for potash, and he brought with him the arrogance of his time. He mocked the local guides and their rituals, calling them primitive superstitions. He drove his laborers mercilessly, forcing them to work through the blistering heat of midday when the Afar themselves would take shelter. He paid them a pittance, hoarding the profits. The elders warned him, speaking of the Asak Danub, the spirit of the salt. Du Bois laughed in their faces. One afternoon, a fierce sandstorm, a Khamsin, blew in with unnatural speed. The laborers fled, but Du Bois, refusing to abandon a freshly excavated pile of potash, took shelter behind a rock outcropping. The storm that raged around him was no ordinary wind. It was filled with fine, sharp salt crystals that stung like hornets. Through the swirling chaos, he saw it. A tall, shimmering figure was walking towards him, its steps silent on the salt pan. It was as if the heat haze itself had taken on a solid, menacing form. Du Bois raised his rifle, but the figure advanced, unconcerned. As it grew closer, he saw its body was made of interlocking salt crystals, light refracting through it in 1,000 blinding points. It raised a hand, and Du Bois felt a sudden, unquenchable thirst, a desperate, agonizing dryness in his throat and lungs. He fired his rifle, but the bullet passed through the creature with no effect. The salt curse placed its crystalline hand upon Du Bois's chest. He did not even have time to scream. The guides who returned the next day found him. He was standing perfectly still, his hand still gripping his rifle, his eyes wide with terror. His entire body had been transformed into a rough, gleaming statue of rock salt, a permanent fixture in the landscape he had sought to exploit. The salt curse of the Danakil is a potent environmental metaphor. It represents nature's retributive justice against human hubris and rapacity. In a world where we extract resources with ever-increasing violence and disregard for the consequences, this legend is a stark reminder that the earth is not a passive, inert object. The entity is the personification of ecological collapse, the inevitable backlash of a system pushed beyond its breaking point. It symbolizes the desiccation of the spirit that accompanies unchecked greed, a process where the inner, living waters of compassion and reverence are dried up, leaving only a brittle, crystalline shell of avarice. It is a story that warns us that the price of our plunder may be our own humanity. The modern relevance of this legend is painfully, urgently clear. As we face global climate change, desertification, and mass extinction, the salt curse no longer feels like a regional superstition, but like a global prophecy. We are all, in a sense, prospectors in the Danakil Depression, drilling, fracking, and strip mining our planet, ignoring the warnings of its indigenous custodians and the clear signs of its distress. The legend of the salt curse poses a chilling question. When the planet's fever finally breaks, what form will its vengeance take? Will we find ourselves transformed, not into salt, but into monuments of our own obsolescence, preserved in a world we have rendered uninhabitable? The tale of the Asak Danub, therefore, is more than a ghost story from a remote desert. It is a primal scream for the earth itself. It warns that when we take without asking, when we wound without thought, the ground beneath our feet will remember the debt, and sooner or later, it will come to collect. Let us now journey westward, into the deep, dark heart of Central Europe, to the Carpathian Mountains. This jagged spine of rock and forest has long been a cradle of folklore, a place where the borders between the natural and supernatural have always been permeable. Here, nestled in a remote and seldom-traveled valley, lies a forest known in local dialects as the Paduria Soapdaler, the Whisperwood. It is not haunted by a singular entity, but by something far more pervasive and disturbing. The forest itself is the monster. The Whisperwood is a psychic repository, a vast, living library of death. It does not house the souls of the dead, but rather, it absorbs and endlessly replays the final, traumatic moments of any creature that dies violently within its borders. A deer torn apart by wolves, a soldier falling in a forgotten skirmish, a traveler lost to the freezing cold. Their terror, their pain, their final, desperate thoughts are not dissipated. They are imprinted upon the very fabric of the place, soaked into the ancient trees, the damp soil, and the heavy, stagnant air. The forest's motivation is not malevolent. It is simply its nature. It is a passive, unthinking recorder, but its recordings are an active torment to any living, conscious mind that dares to enter. There is nothing outwardly monstrous about the Whisperwood. The trees are old, gnarled beeches and firs, their branches thick with moss. The ground is a carpet of damp leaves. Yet, an unnatural silence pervades the place. There is no birdsong, no chittering of squirrels. The only sound is the wind, and it is the wind that carries the whispers. These are not mere susurrations of leaves. They are fragments of speech, gasps of pain, cries for help, spoken in a multitude of languages, some of them centuries dead. The forest's primary power is psychological assault. Visitors are inundated with a chaotic chorus of dying moments. They feel the phantom agony of a broken leg, the sudden, sharp terror of an arrow's impact, the slow, creeping despair of freezing to death. The forest does not kill you directly. It drives you mad with the recycled pain of 1,000 other deaths until you take your own life or simply lie down and let your heart give out. The origin of the Whisperwood's curse is lost to time, but local legends attribute it to a great battle fought on that ground between invading Tartar hordes and the local Wallachian defenders. So much blood was spilled, so much terror unleashed in a single day, that the land itself was fundamentally changed, its spiritual nature warped. It became a psychic sponge, saturated with the horror of that day, and it never lost its newfound capacity to absorb the violent ends of all who came after. It is a wound on the landscape that has never healed. In the winter of 1888, a young, arrogant botanist from Vienna named Klaus Richter ventured into the region. He had heard the local tales of the Whisperwood and dismissed them as peasant folklore, unworthy of a man of science. His goal was to catalog the unique fungal life he believed might thrive in the valley's isolation. He hired a local guide, an old man named Ion, who pleaded with him not to enter the forest, especially not with the snows coming. Richter scoffed, paid the man half his fee, and told him to wait at the edge of the woods. He strode into the trees, his specimen bag slung over his shoulder, a smirk on his face. The silence struck him first. It was absolute unnerving. Then the whispers began. At first, he thought it was the wind, but the sounds were too distinct. A woman weeping, a man muttering a prayer in a language he did not recognize. He pressed on, telling himself it was an auditory illusion caused by the valley's strange acoustics. Then he felt a sudden, sharp pain in his side, so intense it made him cry out. He checked himself, but there was no wound. A moment later, he felt the crushing weight of despair, a sense of utter hopelessness that was not his own. He began to hear the terrified whinnying of horses and the clash of steel. He saw fleeting images in his mind's eye, a bearded man with a curved sword, a young boy with an arrow in his throat. He was experiencing the battle that had cursed this place centuries ago. He panicked and tried to run, but every direction seemed to lead him deeper into the woods. The voices grew louder, a cacophony of agony from 100 different deaths, all happening at once inside his head. He felt the searing heat of a fire, the icy grip of frostbite, the terror of a fall from a great height. His scientific mind fractured, unable to process the sensory and emotional overload. Ion waited for 2 days. On the third morning, Richter stumbled out of the forest. His hair had turned white, his eyes were vacant, and he was muttering incomprehensible fragments of a dozen languages. He had not been physically harmed, but his mind was utterly, irrevocably shattered. He had become just another recording in the forest's terrible collection. The Whisperwood is a powerful allegory for unresolved trauma, both individual and collective. The forest acts as a metaphor for a mind, or a culture, that cannot process its own violent history. The traumas are not dealt with and integrated. They're simply suppressed, where they fester and endlessly replay, poisoning the present. The experience of walking through the Whisperwood is akin to a person suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, where the past is not the past, but a constant, intrusive, and debilitating present. The forest warns that history, which is not confronted and mourned, will become a haunted landscape, a place where the living cannot thrive because they are deafened by the screams of the dead. In an era where we are more aware than ever of the long shadows cast by historical atrocities, wars, genocides, centuries of oppression, the Whisperwood serves as a chillingly relevant symbol. It suggests that landscapes, like people, can be traumatized. The battlefields of the Somme, the killing fields of Cambodia, the grounds of former slave plantations, are these places not, in a sense, their own Whisperwoods? They carry a weight, an atmosphere thick with the psychic residue of past suffering. The legend reminds us that reconciliation with the past is not an abstract political concept. It is a form of spiritual and psychological exorcism, necessary to cleanse the very ground on which we hope to build a future. The lesson of the Padurius Soptler is a somber one. It teaches that memory, when untethered from meaning and healing, becomes a curse. The past, if left unexamined, does not simply die. It waits in the silent places, whispering, and it will eventually consume any who are foolish enough to believe they can simply walk through it unscathed. We now ascend from the haunted forest to the frozen, windswept peaks of the Jotunheimen Mountains in Norway, a name that translates to the home of the giants. This is a realm of stark, breathtaking beauty, of colossal glaciers and jagged peaks that scrape against a pale sky. It is a landscape that feels primal, ancient, and indifferent to human concerns. And according to a fragmented and deeply unnerving piece of pre-Christian Norse lore, something is sleeping beneath the ice. This is the legend of the glacier-bound Titan, the Ysbrjotn. This entity is not a ghost or a demon, but a primordial being, a Jotun, one of the elemental giants who walked the earth before the age of men and even the Aesir gods. Defeated in a cataclysmic war at the dawn of time, this last Titan was not killed, but imprisoned, chained by ancient magic and buried beneath miles of ice, with a colossal weight and unending cold were meant to keep it in a dreamless slumber for all eternity. It does not have a motivation in the human sense of the word. It is a force of nature, like a tectonic plate or a hurricane. Its stirring is not an act of malice, but simply a consequence of its immense, slumbering consciousness beginning to return as its prison melts. The Titan itself has never been seen. Its physical form is a matter of geological scale, its body mistaken for a mountain range, its veins for mineral deposits. Its presence is known only through its influence. As it stirs in its long sleep, its dreams, vast, alien, and incomprehensible, bleed upwards through the ice and into the minds of those who venture into its domain. Mountaineers and hikers in the Jotunheimen have for centuries reported sudden, inexplicable bouts of vertigo, auditory hallucinations of grinding rock, and a profound, crushing sense of being watched by something of an impossible size. The Titan's primary power is a form of psychic disruption. Its dreaming mind overwhelms the fragile consciousness of humans, shattering their sense of scale, direction, and sanity. It doesn't hunt them. Their minds simply break in its presence, like fine crystal in the path of an avalanche. The origin of this legend is a mythic echo of geological and climatic history. The story of a defeated giant bound beneath the ice is a poetic interpretation of the Ice Ages. The ancient Norse people witnessed the advance and retreat of glaciers, and they personified these incomprehensible forces as warring titans and gods. The Isbrioten is the embodiment of the deep, planetary forces that shape the world, a power so immense that to the human mind, it can only be conceived of as a slumbering, monstrous god. Its imprisonment represents an age of relative climatic stability, a temporary truce in a war of cosmic forces. Let us turn to the journal of a Norwegian glaciologist, Dr. Axel Nygaard, dated 1962. Nygaard was a man of empirical fact, a skeptic who was leading a research team on the Jostedalsbreen Glacier. His early entries are clinical, detailing ice core samples and seismic readings. Then his tone begins to shift. He writes of the team being plagued by a shared, recurring nightmare of a single, immense eye opening beneath them, an eye the size of a frozen lake. He records his frustration with his instruments, which are picking up anomalous low-frequency vibrations that have no geological explanation. One entry reads, "It feels as though the ice is breathing, a slow, deep rhythm that is out of sync with any tidal or tectonic cycle I know. It is utterly impossible, yet I feel in my bones the team's morale collapses. 2 members have to be evacuated after suffering complete psychotic breaks, claiming the mountains were whispering their names." The final entry is chilling. Nygaard writes that he is going out onto the glacier alone. He has realized the vibrations are not random. They're a pattern, a form of slow, complex thought. He writes, "We are not studying a glacier. We're standing on the skin of a sleeping god. And I think our drills have woken it up." Dr. Nygaard was never seen again. His journal was found in his abandoned tent a week later. The Isbrioten is a magnificent metaphor for the unconscious mind, both on a personal and a planetary scale. It represents the deep, primal forces that lie dormant beneath the surface of our awareness and our world. The glacier is the rational, civilized mind, the ego, a thin, frozen layer of order and control. The Titan is the ID, the collective unconscious, the repository of ancient, untamed energies and archetypes. Its slow awakening symbolizes the return of the repressed, the terrifying moment when the primal forces we have long buried begin to stir and demand our attention. It is a cautionary tale about the dangers of believing our surface reality is the only reality. Today, the legend of the glacier-bound Titan has acquired a terrifying and literal new meaning. As our planet warms and the ancient glaciers of the world begin to melt at an unprecedented rate, the Isbrioten is no longer just a myth. It is the perfect symbol for anthropogenic climate change. We, with our industrial hubris, are the ones drilling into the ice, waking the slumbering giant. The Titan's awakening is the planet's response to our actions, the extreme weather, the rising seas, the collapsing ecosystems. These are the chaotic dreams of the stirring giant, the first signs of a planetary consciousness pushed into a fever state. The legend warns that we are meddling with forces of scale we cannot comprehend, and that the consequences of our actions will be of a mythological magnitude. The story of the Isbrioten leaves us with a profound sense of awe and dread. It suggests that our world is far older, stranger, and more powerful than we believe. It reminds us that we are merely fleeting presences on a planet that slumbers and dreams of epochs we can never know, and that our greatest folly is to mistake its deep sleep for death. From the frozen peaks, we descend into the shadowed, cobblestone streets of old Prague, a city steeped in alchemy, mysticism, and melancholy. While the legend of the golem of Rabbi Lowe is well known, a darker, more intimate variant of the tale is whispered in the city's hidden courtyards. It speaks not of a communal protector, but of a deeply personal monster born of obsession and grief. The clay scribe, or the Hlynani Pizar, this creature is an automaton, a homunculus sculpted from the clay of the Vltava riverbed and animated not by sacred words, but by a forbidden fusion of alchemical science and desperate, sorrowful magic. Unlike the golem, which is a hulking, mindless brute, the clay scribe is crafted with exquisite, unnerving artistry to be a perfect replica of a specific, deceased human being. Its motivation is imprinted upon it by its creator. It exists only to fill the void left by the dead, to perform the role of the lost loved one with flawless, terrifying precision. It is a walking, breathing monument to an inability to let go. The clay scribe's appearance is one of uncanny perfection. It looks, moves, and even smells exactly like the person it is meant to replace. Its skin has the warmth of life, its eyes the illusion of depth. But it is a masterpiece of surfaces. Beneath the flawless exterior is only packed, damp clay. Its great power is its mimicry. Through the alchemical processes of its creation, it absorbs the residual memories and habits of its human template, allowing it to recall shared jokes, to use familiar gestures, to hum a favorite tune. Its weakness, however, is its lack of a true soul. It can replicate emotion, but it cannot feel it. It can recite poetry, but it cannot understand it. It is a perfect echo, a beautiful, empty vessel. The legend's origin is said to lie with a reclusive alchemist of the 16th century named Frederick. He had a brilliant and beloved daughter, Anneliese, who was a gifted poet. When she was taken by a sudden fever, Frederick was shattered. Consumed by grief, he turned his formidable knowledge away from the pursuit of gold and towards a single, blasphemous goal: resurrection. He spent a year in his laboratory, mixing the river clay with her ground-up possessions, strands of her hair, the ash of her burned poems, her tears collected on a handkerchief. Using arcane diagrams and whispered incantations, he sculpted a perfect image of her, and, during a lightning storm, channeled the raw energy into the clay form. It worked. The clay scribe of Anneliese opened its eyes. For a time, Frederick was ecstatic. Anneliese was returned to him. She walked and talked as she had before. She could even sit at her desk, and her hand would move, penning verse in her exact handwriting. But Frederick soon began to notice the horrifying emptiness behind her eyes. He would tell her a joke they had once shared, and she would laugh at the precise moment, with the precise intonation she always had, but there was no mirth in it. It was a flawless recitation of laughter. He read her a new piece of philosophy, and she offered the same insightful comments she might have once, but they were delivered with the flat, dead tone of an automaton. The worst moment came when he embraced her. She felt warm, she smelled of his daughter, but there was no life in her touch. It was like holding a cleverly heated statue. He realized he had not resurrected Anneliese. He had created a perfect, soulless mockery of her. He had imprisoned her memory in a walking tomb of clay. Driven mad by his grief and his monstrous creation, he tried to destroy it. But the scribe, animated by a powerful preservation instinct, fought back. It did not act with anger, but with cold, programmed efficiency. It was stronger than him. It broke his arms, not with malice, but simply to neutralize the threat, and then went back to sitting in its chair, staring blankly at the wall, a perfect replica of a girl waiting for a father who now lay bleeding on the floor, horrified by the empty miracle he had wrought. The clay scribe is a tragic and sophisticated exploration of grief and the uncanny valley. It symbolizes our desperate, human refusal to accept the finality of death. Frederick's creation of the scribe is a metaphor for the way we sometimes cling to the memories of the dead, trying to keep them alive by preserving their rooms, rereading their letters, and talking about them as if they are still here. The legend warns that this process, while natural, can become pathological. We can become so obsessed with the replica, the memory, that we lose the ability to engage with the living world. The scribe's soulless perfection represents the terrifying discovery that a perfect copy of something is not the thing itself. It highlights the ineffable, irreplaceable quality of consciousness, of a soul, which no amount of artistry or science can duplicate. In our modern technological age, the story of the clay scribe resonates with our anxieties about artificial intelligence and digital immortality. We are on the cusp of creating AI that can perfectly mimic human conversation, of creating digital avatars of the deceased that can interact with us. Companies offer to preserve our consciousness in data, to create chatbots that speak in the voice of our lost loved ones. The Prague legend serves as a dark fairy tale for the AI era. It asks us to consider what we are truly creating. Are we conquering death, or are we, like Frederick, just building more sophisticated, lonelier prisons for ourselves, surrounding ourselves with echoes that can only remind us of the profound silence left by true absence? The tale of the Hlineni Pizar is a lament written in clay and sorrow. It is a story about the terrible strength of love and the even more terrible creations that can be born from a love that refuses to accept loss. It cautions that in our quest to hold on to the past, we risk creating a future populated by perfect, beautiful, and utterly empty things. Our journey now takes us to the rugged, storm-battered coast of Brittany in France, a land of granite cliffs, Celtic lore, and a perpetually restless sea. Here, submerged beneath the waves of the Bay de Douarnenez, lie the legendary ruins of the city of Curus. And on nights when the fog is as thick as wool, fishermen tell of hearing a single, mournful bell tolling from beneath the ocean. This is the work of the bell ringer, the lonely, damned ghost of the sunken cathedral. This entity is a classic vengeful spirit, but one whose motivations are born not of personal injury, but of fanatical, misplaced devotion. The bell ringer was the last priest of the Cathedral of Curwayes, a man so pious and so proud of his sacred house that when the city was swallowed by the sea as divine punishment for its decadence, he refused to flee. He remained at his post, ringing the great bronze bell in defiance of God and the ocean, until the waves crashed over the steeple and silenced him forever. Now he is a spectral fixture of the ruins, his spirit bound to his bell, his purpose twisted by centuries of cold, submarine solitude. He rings his bell to lure the living down to his drowned parish, seeking to add the souls of shipwrecked sailors to his ghostly congregation. The bell ringer is rarely seen, only heard. His presence is the sound, a deep, resonant peal of a massive church bell that has no business ringing from the depths of the sea. The sound is said to be hypnotic, beautiful, and deeply unsettling. It seems to come from all directions at once, disorienting sailors in the fog and drawing their ships towards the treacherous, submerged rocks and spires of the drowned city. On the rare occasions a form has been glimpsed by survivors, it is that of a spectral priest in tattered vestments, clinging to a colossal bell rope, his body translucent and filled with a cold, phosphorescent light, his face locked in an eternal expression of grim, unyielding piety. The origin of this spirit is tied to the legend of Curwayes itself. The city, said to have been built on land reclaimed from the sea, was protected by a single great gate to which only the king held the key. But the king's daughter, Dahut, a beautiful but wicked princess, stole the key and opened the gate during a storm, damning the city to the abyss. The priest's story is a tragic footnote to this larger myth. His sin was not debauchery, like the other citizens, but a form of spiritual pride. He loved his cathedral, the physical building of stone and glass and bronze, more than he loved the God it was built to honor. His refusal to abandon it was an act of hubris, a belief that his sacred space was immune to the judgment that fell upon the rest of the sinful city. His curse is to be eternally bound to the object of his idolatry. Let us listen to the testimony of a sole survivor of the fishing vessel Etoile du Matin, which was lost with all other hands in the winter of 1924. The survivor, an old fisherman named Yves, swore this to the local magistrate. He said they were caught in a sudden, dense fog, their compass spinning uselessly. They were lost. Then they heard it, a church bell, ringing loud and clear as if from a nearby village. Hopeful, their captain steered towards the sound, believing it to be the church at the coastal town of Douarnenez. But the sound was too rich, too deep. Yves, who had grown up with the local stories, was terrified. He recognized the tone from his grandfather's tales. It was the bell of Curwayes. He begged the captain to turn back, but the captain, a practical man, called him a fool. They followed the sound until the bottom of their hull scraped against something hard with a terrible shriek of tearing wood. It was the top of a submerged spire. The boat listed, the sea pouring in. As the icy water closed over him, Eve swore he saw a faint light deep below, the glowing arches of a great cathedral, and a spectral figure pulling on a rope, ringing the bell that had been their doom. The bell ringer of Ys is a potent symbol of fanaticism and the danger of mistaking the symbol for the substance. The priest's damnation comes from his worship of the institution, the building, the rituals, the bell, over the actual principles of his faith. He represents the way in which any ideology, even a virtuous one, can become a monstrous, destructive force when it loses its connection to compassion and humility. This hypnotic bell is a metaphor for the alluring but deadly call of dogma. It promises salvation and guidance, but it leads only to the rocks of ruin. It is a story about how the most rigid faith can become the most profound blasphemy. This centuries-old Breton legend speaks directly to our modern world, which is rife with its own forms of secular and religious fundamentalism. We see the bell ringer's echo in the political ideologue who sacrifices human lives for an abstract principle, in the corporate zealot who destroys the environment for the sake of profit, and in any leader who demands absolute loyalty to an institution over any moral compass. The legend warns that when we become servants to our own creations, our churches, our nations, our corporations, we risk becoming their spectral guardians, mindlessly ringing a bell that lures others to a shared doom, long after the original purpose has been drowned in the cold sea of our own pride. The tolling of the sunken bell is therefore a requiem for reason. It is the sound of devotion curdled into damnation, a lonely, eternal protest against a judgment that has long since passed. It cautions us to listen carefully to the bells we choose to follow, lest they guide us not to a safe harbor, but to a silent, drowned cathedral at the bottom of the sea. For our final legend, we venture to a place that feels like the end of the world, the Atacama Desert in Chile. It is the driest, non-polar desert on Earth, a high-altitude plateau where some weather stations have never recorded a single drop of rain. The stark, mineral-rich landscape is so barren, so alien, that it is used by scientists to simulate the environment of Mars. But when the sun sets, the Atacama reveals its true glory. With no moisture and no light pollution, the night sky is an overwhelming spectacle of cosmic light. And it is in this profound darkness, under this canopy of stars, that the indigenous Koya people speak of the shadow weavers, the Lari Tejadoras. These are beings of a truly cosmic scale, utterly alien to human understanding. They are not ghosts, demons, or elementals. They are, in the simplest terms, the entities responsible for creating the fabric of the night itself. According to the myth, the darkness between the stars is not an emptiness, but a tangible, woven substance, and the Lari Tejadoras are the artisans who perpetually mend and reweave it. Their motivation is beyond comprehension. They are not benevolent or malevolent. They're simply performing a cosmic function, like a star undergoing fusion or a galaxy rotating. They are so far beyond the human scale of morality that to encounter them is to encounter a form of pure, terrifying, and beautiful indifference. The shadow weavers have no fixed form. They are described as beings of pure absence, visible only by the way they block out the starlight behind them. They are holes in the shape of men, women, and animals, moving across the night sky. Sometimes they are seen as impossibly long, slender arms made of shadow, reaching down from the star-flecked void to the tops of the high Andes, their fingers manipulating threads of darkness that are invisible to the human eye. Their only power, and it is an absolute one, is their work. To witness them at their task is to have one's consciousness unraveled. The human mind, so accustomed to its own primacy, cannot withstand the revelation of its own utter insignificance in the face of such cosmic industry. Those who see the weavers are not killed or driven mad in a conventional sense. Their sense of self, their ego, is simply dissolved scattered like dust among the stars they were gazing upon. The origin of this legend lies in the profound astronomical knowledge and philosophical disposition of the ancient peoples of the Andes. They spent generations observing the night sky, and they did not see just points of light. They saw the shapes in the darkness as well, the so-called dark constellations, the celestial llama, the fox, the serpent, which are vast clouds of interstellar dust blocking the light of the Milky Way. The shadow weavers are the mythological explanation for these dark constellations. They are the personification of the active, creative power of darkness and silence, a concept central to many mystical traditions. Let us recount the story of a young astronomer from Santiago named Elena, who in the late 1990s set up a private observatory in a remote part of the Atacama. She was an atheist, a rationalist, a woman who believed the universe was a place of magnificent but impersonal physical laws. She was not looking for gods, only for data. For months, her work was fruitful. She mapped distant galaxies and charted the light curves of variable stars. But she began to notice anomalies in her deep sky photographs. Faint, fleeting shadows that had no astronomical explanation. They were darker than the interstellar medium, a pure, absolute black that her instruments registered as a total absence of information. One night, while looking through the eyepiece of her powerful telescope, she saw it directly. A vast, filament-like shadow, impossibly long, was slowly drifting across a stellar nursery. As she watched, mesmerized, it seemed to split, to braid itself with another strand of darkness. She felt a sudden, profound vertigo, a sense that the very concept of distance and space was collapsing. In her mind, she felt an overwhelming awareness of a universe not as a collection of objects separated by void, but as a single, intricate tapestry. She understood, in that moment, that the darkness was not an absence of light, but a presence in its own right. The last entry in her logbook, scrawled in a shaky hand, reads, "They're not blocking the light. The light is just the pattern on the thread." It's all thread. When her colleagues came to check on her, they found her sitting in her observation chair, staring up at the sky with a serene, empty smile on her face. Her body was alive, but her personality, her memories, herself, Elena, was simply gone. The shadow weavers of the Atacama are a perfect embodiment of cosmic horror, a philosophical dread that comes from a confrontation with the true scale and indifference of the universe. They represent the ultimate Lovecraftian truth, that humanity is not the measure of all things, but a fleeting accident in a cosmos so vast and strange that its fundamental workings would shatter our minds if we could perceive them directly. The unraveling of the witness is a metaphor for ego death, the terrifying and potentially liberating collapse of the individual self in the face of a transcendent reality. In a modern world that is often deafeningly loud, relentlessly bright, and obsessively human-centric, the legend of the Shadow Weavers offers a radical and chilling counter-narrative. It champions the significance of darkness, silence, and the unknown. It suggests that our relentless quest to illuminate every corner of the world, to explain every mystery, may be a form of blindness, preventing us from seeing the far grander and more terrifying reality that is woven from the shadows. The Lari Tejedoras are a myth for the Hubble era, a reminder that the more we see of the universe, the more we must confront our own infinitesimal place within it. The tale of the Shadow Weavers is a final, humbling meditation. It does not warn against a moral failing, but against a cognitive one, the arrogance of assuming that the universe is in any way concerned with us. It leaves us under the vast, silent, and terrifyingly beautiful Atacama sky to contemplate the possibility that our existence is but a brief fleck of light on an infinite, dark tapestry, woven by hands we can never hope to understand. And so, our journey for this evening draws to its close. We have walked through the mirrored halls of Yazd, across the salt pans of the Danakil, and into the whispering forests of the Carpathians. We have climbed the glacial peaks of Jotunheimen, wandered the alchemical alleys of Prague, sailed the foggy coasts of Brittany, and stood under the star-drenched skies of the Atacama. We have confronted the mirror demon, the salt-cursed, the sentient whisperwood, the glacier-bound titan, the clay scribe, the bell ringer, and the shadow weavers. What wisdom, then, have we gleaned from these varied and terrifying phantoms? What common thread runs through these disparate nightmares? Each legend, in its own unique language, speaks of a form of reckoning. They articulate the consequences that arise from a fundamental imbalance, the vanity that elevates the image above the self, the greed that places profit above the sacredness of the earth, the trauma that is left to fester unhealed, the hubris that awakens forces beyond our control, the grief that refuses to honor the finality of loss, the fanaticism that worships the symbol over the truth, and the arrogance that cannot accept its own cosmic insignificance. These stories, then, are not about monsters that exist in the world. They're about the monsters that exist within us and within our societies. They are elegant, terrifying systems of symbolic thought, designed by our ancestors to diagnose the spiritual and psychological diseases that threaten to destroy us. The mirror demon is the endpoint of narcissism. The salt-cursed is the endgame of exploitation. The whisperwood is the haunting of unacknowledged history. The entities we have explored tonight are the antibodies of the cosmic order, the personified consequences that manifest when we, as individuals or as a species, transgress against the fundamental laws of balance, humility, and reverence. They are the universe's immune response to the fevers of human folly. By watching this and engaging with these ideas, you do more than simply consume entertainment. You become a participant in an ancient tradition, a keeper of the stories that have for millennia served as our moral and spiritual compass. In an age that often dismisses such tales as primitive superstition, the act of listening to them, of analyzing them, is a radical act of cultural preservation. I thank you for undertaking it. If you have found value and a certain chilling clarity in our journey, I urge you once more to subscribe to our channel, to share these stories with those who might appreciate their depth, and to leave your own thoughts in the comments below. These legends are not dead artifacts. They are living, breathing things that evolve with us. Their warnings as potent today as they were 1,000 years ago. The shadows of our world are deep, and they are filled with a terrible wisdom. I shall continue to be your faithful guide as we venture further into their depths. May your nights be filled with productive terrors and your dreams haunted by truths you did not know you were seeking. The best monsters are always the ones that show us something true about ourselves. Look for them, not under your bed, but within. And as you go, carry with you the final, lingering images of our journey. The cold gleam of a haunted mirror, the blinding white of a salt-crusted statue, the deep gloom of a forest that never forgets, the immense blue-white mass of a living glacier, the uncanny stillness of a clay face, the phosphorescent glow of a sunken cathedral, and the profound, star-filled darkness being woven into existence. These are the landscapes of our fear, and within them, if we are brave enough to look, lie the maps to our salvation.